Throughout the Second World War, civilians and soldiers alike faced the same dangers: bombing, starvation, encirclement, occupation. But not everyone reacted the same way. Some froze, some fell apart, and some, often the most unassuming individuals, found a way to adapt, endure, and outlive circumstances that should have broken them. What separated them wasn't luck, strength, or training. It was mindset. It was psychological wiring forged through culture, upbringing, personal discipline, or a single moment of clarity under fire. And the deeper you study wartime diaries, intelligence analyses, and post-war psychological reports, the clearer one pattern becomes. Survival isn't random. It's repeatable. It can be learned. And the people who understood these patterns, whether British ARP wardens, Soviet partisans, or civilians trapped in sieges, had a measurable advantage. That's what we're exploring today. The real World War II psychological mechanisms that tilted survival in one direction or another, and how these same principles apply today in any crisis the modern world can throw at you. Across every major theatre of the Second World War, the individuals who adapted fastest were the ones who accepted reality without delay. In London, during the Blitz, the psychological studies conducted by the Mass Observation Project, repeatedly noted that people who mentally accepted air raids as a normal part of life were less likely to panic and more likely to make rational choices in the moment. This wasn't resignation, it was clarity. In Leningrad, civilians who recognized early that the siege would be long and brutal were the ones who rationed proactively insulated apartments, reduced unnecessary movement, and aligned their expectations with the new rules of existence. When people today face disasters, the same principle applies. The faster someone stops waiting for normal to return and starts operating inside the reality that exists, the more efficiently they respond. A practical modern example is the early-stage response to blackouts or supply chain disruptions. The moment one stops assuming it's temporary and instead prepares for it to last, the quality of decision-making improves dramatically. Acceptance stabilizes thinking, and, stable thinking keeps you alive. WW2 survival accounts consistently show that panic wasn't simply fear, it was actually the absence of a task. During the sinking of naval vessels, sailors who were trained to complete specific assignments, like closing watertight doors, retrieving emergency gear, or guiding others to exits, were far less likely to lose control. The task, in essence, anchored the mind. In concentration camps, those individuals who assigned themselves mental routines, whether it was preserving personal hygiene, organizing information, or maintaining any form of structure, they reported a stronger sense of inner equilibrium. And in the Warsaw Uprising, resistance fighters and trapped civilians alike used task-based focus to keep paralysis at bay. Modern psychological research only confirms what World War II survivors demonstrated. Panic dominates when the brain has no direction. One can apply this today, by establishing pre-planned response actions long before crisis hits. For example, if an earthquake strikes, deciding before it happens where to move, what essentials to grab, and how to exit removes the mental vacuum that panic feeds on. World War II taught that discipline of thought begins with the smallest tasks, executed consistently. One of the strongest World War II survival predictors was social connection. In bombed-out British neighbourhoods, the people who helped others, checking shelters, caring for children, reinforcing windows, weren't just acting altruistically. They were reinforcing their own psychological resilience. The same was documented in Japanese cities after Allied firebombing, where survivors who organised communal cooking, water gathering and fire spotting had the highest emotional endurance. During the Siege of Stalingrad, small groups who pooled resources survived longer than isolated individuals with equal or even greater supplies. Social responsibility gave structure, purpose, and a network of assistance that absorbed stress. Today, this principle applies directly to emergency planning. Having a mutual aid circle, sharing skills with neighbours, or coordinating preparedness with even 2 or 3 trusted people increases resources, reduces fear, and widens the margin for error. World War II repeatedly demonstrated that lone wolf survival is more myth than reality. People survive together. Bravery is a momentary burst. Emotional regulation is continuous. World War II diaries from medics, frontline soldiers and civilians show that the ones who endured bombardments, hunger and prolonged uncertainty were not the ones who felt nothing, but the ones who could manage what they felt. Emotional regulation meant knowing when to rest, when to push, when to speak, and when to remain silent. In the ruins of Manila, survivors who avoided impulsive decisions, even under extreme threat, were more likely to escape violent encounters. In prisoner of war camps, prisoners who recognized when they were entering emotional exhaustion, what we now call burnout, took deliberate steps to preserve strength, whether through controlled breathing, maintaining routines, or isolating themselves briefly to recover. Applying this today is, well, straightforward. Controlling breathing during stress, grounding oneself through physical cues, or stepping away before making critical decisions are skills that modern survival instructors emphasize, and they mirror the instinctive strategies of Second World War survivors. Emotional regulation buys time, and time buys options. Across all fronts, survivors often pointed to a reason, family duty, belief responsibility, or a personal standard, that anchored them when conditions deteriorated. Viktor Frankl's observations in camps are the most famous, but they were not unique. Soviet soldiers encircled at Demyansk, Norwegian resistance couriers, families trapped under occupation, all referenced a psychological anchor that kept their minds from collapsing. Meaning reduces desperation. Desperation leads to fatal mistakes. Applying this today means identifying one's internal anchor before crisis hits. It can be responsibility for family, adherence to a code, or determination to see something through. World War II shows that people who had a reason to endure endured far longer than those who didn't. You know, the value in studying these patterns isn't just academic, it's actionable. Acceptance, for instance, helps you react quickly. Task focus, well, that prevents panic. Social cohesion, interestingly enough, multiplies strength. Emotional regulation stabilizes decision-making. And meaning. meaning sustains long-term endurance. These weren't just theories in the Second World War. They were, in fact, the behaviours that separated those who survived from those who didn't. Anyone today, whether you're a historian, a survivalist, or quite frankly, just an everyday viewer, can practice these principles through routines, community planning, crisis rehearsals, and a bit of deliberate mental conditioning. If this deep dive into the psychological mechanics of survival in the Second World War gave you something valuable, do make sure you subscribe to Warpaths of Europe, share this video with someone who appreciates real historical analysis, and help keep this channel growing with content built for serious history enthusiasts.